sat on the crumbling terrace overlooking the gardens, pen poised, perched on the canvas stool that she had brought especially for the occasion, and watched the workers below, hoping for inspiration. A line about the awakening of sleeping beauty in her impenetrable castle flitted through Jacintha's head. But, other than that, she could think of nothing to write. She chewed the end of her cheap ballpoint and stared down into what remained of the walled garden, now a mess of holes and trenches, as the archaeological team went about their work. She watched as the crouching, soil-caked young diggers worked in their rectangular trenches, sometimes chatting, sometimes silent, and lost in their task. Surely their earnest activity would inspire a poem of some kind, even a few lines about the young uncovering the old. But still no words came. Jacintha reached for her thermos flask. It was time for an inspirational coffee, laced with something stronger to get the creative juices flowing. As she sipped the reviving liquid, she sensed that the calm, absorbed atmosphere in the garden had altered. The change was subtle at first. Urgent, whispered words, a flurry of activity here and there. Then the archaeologists, who had been working in other parts of the gardens, downed tools and converged on the walled garden, crowding around the centre. One of them produced a tiny mobile phone from an inside pocket and began to talk into it urgently. Something was happening. Something had been found. Jacintha stood up and strained to hear, but she was too far away to catch any telltale words. A young man came running towards her. He was about to rush past, but she put out a hand to stop him and gave him her sweetest smile. "Jake?" Her eyes met his. "What's going on? Have they found something exciting?" Jake glanced toward the ruined house, torn between duty and potential pleasure. He eyed Jacintha's ample curves appreciatively and chose pleasure. "They've uncovered a human hand in the middle of the walled garden, buried underneath the stone plinth we lifted this morning." Their eyes met again, and Jake made no effort to move. "I'm going to tell Martin. We weren't expecting to find human remains on this dig, so we'll have to inform the authorities. He won't be best pleased. We can't afford a hold-up." Jake stood still, his eyes on Jacintha's breasts, clearly visible beneath the thin cheesecloth of her white top. "Hadn't you better go and tell him, then?" Jacintha said with a sly smile. "And if you're free at 6 o'clock tonight, why don't you join me in the King's Head? You look as though you could do with a drink." "Why not?" He gave her a knowing smile. She was at least 20 years his senior, but what did things like that matter nowadays? Jake turned and ran towards the house, and Jacintha watched the back view of his tight faded jeans appreciatively. Then she strolled down the steps toward the walled garden. The crowd had dispersed, leaving a solitary archaeology student squatting on the brown earth, staring at the ground. Jacintha approached slowly. "What's everyone so excited about?" The young man looked up at her. "Looks like we've found human remains. It'll be another hold-up we can't afford." Jacintha looked down at the ground. The bones stood out stark against the darkness of the soil. A skeletal hand protruded from the earth, the bony fingers scratching, grasping, as though trying to escape. "It looks as if he's trying to get out, doesn't it? Clawing his way to the surface. Just like he's been buried alive." Jacintha turned away and shuddered. Then she took her notebook from her bag and began to scribble. Inspiration had come at last. Chapter 1. Good gardens at Earlsacre, but not as the mode now is. Walled garden with shell grotto and fine parterres, and a curious sun-dilated centre. I like not this garden, the place being somewhat cold. The other gardens fine, with shady walks.